Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're opening up a really fascinating source text. It introduces us to two brothers, figures whose impact still echoes, through the history and culture of millions across Europe.
Yeah, definitely. We're talking about Saints Cyril and Methodius. They're celebrated on May 24th, and the material we've got really paints them as the apostles to the Slavs. But more than that, the absolute founders of Slavic literacy.
Right. And our dive today, it isn't just about retelling their story like a history lesson. We want to unpack what the source says about this.
Right.
This revolutionary thing they did, the intense opposition they ran into, and why their legacy as Enlighteners of the Slavs is just so significant. It really shaped a huge part of Europe.
Absolutely. It's a story where you see faith, sheer brain power, and real determination coming together. They literally translated not just Christianity, but culture itself into a new written language.
Okay, so let's get into it. Who were these brothers? The source material identifies them as Greek, from Thessaloniki.
Born to a Byzantine military commander and his wife. Cyril, his original name was Constantine, was born around 826, and his older brother Methodius, somewhere between 815 and 820.
And the key thing, which the source really highlights, is that Thessaloniki at that time, it wasn't just Greek-speaking, it was surrounded by a large Slavic population.
Exactly, which meant the brothers grew up fluent in the local Slavic dialect.
And that wasn't just, like, a random skill they picked up. The text makes it super clear this was crucial, the absolute bedrock for their later mission.
Couldn't have done it without it.
Though they started out on pretty different paths, didn't they?
Yeah, quite different. Cyril was the academic star, top-tier education in Constantinople, became a respected scholar, librarian at the Hagia Sophia, even taught philosophy.
Wow.
And went on important diplomatic missions for the empire. He was really plugged into the intellectual center.
And Methodius?
He started out more in administration, governed a region in Macedonia for a while, but then he chose the monastic life, ended up on Mount Olympus.
So different routes initially.
But the source is clear. Eventually, both brothers dedicated themselves completely to the church. Their paths converged.
Okay, so they're established figures in the Byzantine world. Why the move? What prompted this specific mission to the Slavic lands?
Well, the call came in 862. It was from Prince Rastislav of Great Moravia. He sent a request to the Byzantine emperor and the patriarch, Photios. He needed missionaries, but specifically ones who could preach and teach Christianity in the language his people actually spoke. Not Latin, not Greek.
Okay, so tailor-made for Cyril and Methodius, given their background.
Precisely. They were seen as uniquely qualified.
Yeah.
The perfect candidates for this very specific kind of unprecedented task.
And before they even set out, Cyril did something. Well, the source presents it as truly monumental, game-changing.
He did. He devised the first ever alphabet for the Slavic language, the Glagolitic script.
Glagolitic. Okay, and that's important because the source points out that the Cyrillic script, the one many people associate with Slavic languages today.
All right, so Cyrillic is named in his honor, but it actually evolved later. It developed from Glagolitic. Glagolitic was the original breakthrough.
Got it. So with this brand new alphabet, what did they actually do?
They took on this enormous task, translating the Bible and the key liturgical books, the church service books, directly into the spoken language of the Slavs, Old Church Slavonic, essentially.
Just stop and think about that for a second. Enabling people to hear the Gospels, to participate in worship in their own language for the very first time. I mean, how revolutionary was that in the 9th century?
It was incredibly revolutionary, maybe even subversive, because their work flew directly in the face of this powerful, established idea known at the time as the trilingual heresy.
The trilingual heresy, that sounds intense. What was that about?
It was pretty divisive, yeah. It was this view held particularly strongly by some in the Western Latin-speaking clergy that Christian worship was only truly valid, only legitimate, if it was conducted in one of three specific languages: Hebrew, Greek, or Latin.
Only those three?
Only those three. Using any other language, like Slavonic, was seen as improper, maybe even spiritually invalid by these groups.
Wow. So Cyril and Methodius weren't just translating texts by creating this alphabet and liturgy.
They were fundamentally challenging that exclusive mindset. They were asserting the dignity, the capacity of the Slavic language itself for sacred use, that it was just as worthy before God.
Which naturally explains why they faced so much pushback. Their success must have really threatened the status quo.
Oh, absolutely. The source makes it clear they faced fierce opposition, especially from those Latin-speaking clergy who clung to the trilingual heresy idea.
It got so bad, didn't it? The source says they were actually expelled from Moravia.
Yes, expelled, after laying all this groundwork.
Incredible. So what did they do then? Where could they even go?
They had to seek higher authority. They traveled to Rome, hoping to get the Pope's blessing for their mission and for the use of the Slavic language in the liturgy.
And how did that go? Who was Pope then?
They were received by Pope Hadrian II. And our source makes a point of noting he was still Orthodox at the time.
Why is that detail significant, do you think?
Well, it hints at the period, right? This is before the Great Schism formally split East and West. So a pope still technically in communion with Constantinople might have been perhaps more open to a mission that originated from the Byzantine Patriarch and one that used the vernacular, something a bit more common in Eastern practice than the strict Latin-only approach that was hardening in parts of the West.
Makes sense. And did Hadrian support them?
He did. That was the crucial victory. The source says Pope Hadrian approved their work. He even celebrated the Slavic liturgy they brought with them, placing their translated books on the altars in Roman churches.
That's huge. Official validation from the top authority in the West.
A massive win. But it was immediately followed by tragedy.
Oh.
While they were still in Rome, Cyril Constantine fell ill, and he died there in 869.
Right after achieving that papal validation, that's incredibly poignant.
It really is. He's buried, the source notes, in the Basilica of St. Clement in Rome. And apparently, his tomb is still a place of pilgrimage for Slavic people today.
So, with Cyril gone, Methodius had to continue the mission alone.
He did. He had to carry that torch. He was ordained Archbishop of Pannonia, that's roughly modern-day Hungary and surrounding areas, and he just threw himself into solidifying the work they'd begun.
Yeah.
The source really emphasizes his perseverance, tirelessly working to preserve the Slavic liturgy, build up the local church structure.
Even with the continued opposition, because you said the Pope's approval didn't make everyone happy.
Not at all. The opposition, particularly from German bishops and proponents of the Latin liturgy, didn't just vanish. Methodius faced constant political and ecclesiastical battles. He was even imprisoned for a time by his opponents.
Imprisoned? Wow.
Yeah. He had to constantly navigate these intense disputes right up until his own death in 885. He really fought for it.
So, looking back, their work clearly went way beyond just converting people. The source seems to argue they laid the actual foundations, the bedrock, for Slavic Christian culture.
But that's exactly the point the source makes. And it wasn't just the two of them. It mentions their key disciples, Saints Clement, Nahum, Angeler, Sava, and Gorazd. These figures were crucial in carrying the work forward after Methodius died.
How did they carry it on?
Well, they were eventually forced out of Moravia, too, after Methodius' death. But they took the knowledge, the books, the tradition south, especially into Bulgaria. There, under royal patronage, they established schools, continued translating texts, and really embedded this new Slavic literary tradition. Clement of Ohrid, in particular, is credited with possibly developing the Cyrillic alphabet itself, building on Glagolitic.
Ah, so that's where Cyrillic likely emerges more formally.
Seems to be the leading theory, yeah, from these disciples' work, particularly in places like Ohrid and Preslav in Bulgaria.
And that explains the incredible breadth of their influence the source mentions. It lists Russians, Bulgarians, Serbs, Slovaks, Czechs, Croats, Slovenes, even Poles indirectly. That's a huge swath of Europe, tracing its literacy and, for many, its Christian faith back to these brothers and their followers.
It's a monumental legacy. It justifies those titles they're given, Enlighteners of the Slavs and equal to the apostles. They didn't just preach. They gave people the tools, the written language, to access faith and knowledge themselves.
You can really hear that reflected in the liturgical texts about them. The source quotes hymns calling them equal to the apostles, teachers of the Slavic lands, and enlighteners who poured out the knowledge of God, specifically through translating the divine books. It highlights their method, education, translation, enlightenment.
Exactly. It wasn't just about belief, it was about understanding.
So, thinking about all this, their historical mission, their struggles,
Yeah.
how does the source suggest this connects to us, today?
Well, it presents them as powerful symbols, especially relevant now, perhaps. Symbols of inclusion, first off. Bringing people into a shared faith through their own language, not forcing them into a foreign one.
And education, too, clearly.
Huge emphasis on education and the power of literacy, and also maybe unity. In a world that's often fragmented by language and culture, they showed a different way.
How does the source characterize that way?
It stresses how they broke down walls. It says explicitly, not with force, not with political maneuvering primarily, but with love. with deep learning, and with making sacred knowledge accessible through liturgy in the common tongue.
That's a powerful model.
It is. And the source suggests their lives remind us that true enlightenment, real progress, often comes through service, through humility, and having your heart set on something beyond just yourself, on God in their case.
It's a powerful example of how taking complex ideas, religious, cultural, and making them understandable, making them resonate within a specific community's context, can fundamentally shift things. It can build culture from the ground up.
It really does make you think, doesn't it?
It does. Which brings us to that final thought. Based on this source, based on their story, maybe consider this. How can you, in your own sphere, whatever that is, try to bring light, truth, or understanding to others? Using the tools, the languages you have available, even when, maybe especially when, you face resistance or people don't quite get it yet.
That's definitely something to reflect on.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the incredible story and impact of Saints Cyril and Methodius.
It really is staggering when you think about it. Their dedication to translating faith, it didn't just spread religion, it literally birthed the written word, the literary culture, for millions upon millions of people.
Yeah, and reflecting on that struggle, that fierce opposition around the trilingual heresy and how they navigated it with papal support but still faced pushback, it just underscores the power, the fundamental importance of making knowledge and understanding genuinely accessible.
Absolutely. And their method, that combination described as love, learning, and liturgy, it does offer a compelling model for bridging divides, even in our own time, doesn't it?
What barriers around you, maybe language barriers, maybe cultural, maybe just barriers of understanding, could be approached with something like that spirit. Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you some valuable insights.
Yeah, hope you found it interesting.